All right, let's get started. So today we are with our Novonesis rep, Adam Kaiser, and he is going to be talking a little about some of his products and technologies. So Adam, thanks for being here.
Thank you. So I'm going to kick it off. So here at Storby Seed, they offer a number of our technologies and products over the years, and there's been some changes to our portfolio and going over some of the technologies that put together the products that you guys have been using for a long time here. And I think to maybe start that, probably the best way to understand is, the main group of products that's available is in the soybean inoculant space. So you might remember years ago, the product was Tag Team LCO, and we've done some changes to the some formulations to make things easier for those running the treater, which is always good because of course when you guys roll up to get your seed, getting you out the door and back to planting as quickly as possible is the goal. So we've made some changes there with formulations and was able to actually break apart some of the technology or some of the products that we were carrying before into the individual technologies. And I'll get into that a little bit. But to start, I think maybe the best way is to talk about soybean nodulation because that's at the foundation of all of this. And so what you see on the screen here is, think of it as a timeline, right? Beginning on the far left, you have where the seed is planted, and then all the way to the right would be harvest. Well, there's some key physiological things that happen during a soybean plant's growth and development. And one of the key things is the formation of a nodule and nitrogen fixation, right? And so that occurs naturally. So if we were to put our most basic rhizobia only inoculant on the seed, or you're relying on the indigenous and the background populations of rhizobia in the soil, this is what would happen. So first that seed needs to germinate, start to grow. At some point in that young plant's life, it recognizes that it needs more nitrogen than it is available as it pulls that energy or those nutrients from the cotyledons. And when that happens, that plant will send a signal out into the soil that's kind of an invitation for Bradyrhizobium to then come and infect and form nodules. That's a really crude way to describe that process. Of course, then the bacteria in the soil or on the seed need to recognize that signal, and then they actually manufacture a signal molecule back to the plant. It's kind of like the RSVP to let the plant know that there's proper species of Bradyrhizobium here, and we're going to make a nodule. And that signal molecule is the LCO signal molecule. When we get into to products like Optimize or Tag Team LCO, you can see where in the past, this dark box here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, all of that is dependent on a lot of environmental things that go on. So if you have cool temperatures and emergence and growth is kind of slowed down and hampered in a way, that signal molecule won't be available, and you will not get nodulation as early as if you were to put the signal molecule on the seed at time of planting. And so that's what's available. A product called Nod Pro, and I'll let Eric talk about that if he's got time or would like to, is kind of the base seed treatment addition to the, of course, the Acceleron package that's protecting us from fungal pathogens, insects, and maybe even some nematodes with the offering. So when it comes to inoculants, this would be base. Now, there's a reason why this is offered as a base technology, and I'll get into that into the minute. But I want you to understand we're only talking about the signal molecule only. So this is going to amp up any of the indigenous population of rhizobia that's there. I'm going to go through some growth and stress differences and advantages that this gives the plant and crop, and ultimately translates into yield. And
So Adam,
another,
just to
yeah,
summarize what you said there, this is a natural molecule. These LCOs are naturally made by the plants. It's just that it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of initiation before those signals are available, before it can tell the native bacteria to start forming nodules. So by applying the NodPro on the seed, that LCO is already there. That nodulation process can start sooner, and you can have more nodules. You can have more total nitrogen later. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great summary. I have nothing to add to that. And you can see that in comparing these two timelines where, that box, what did we delete out of this? This initial plant message, bacterial recognition, and signal molecule production, that's all gone, right? Now, what we can do and what the crop can do is it can fast track and just like you said, it can start that nodulation process earlier, and take advantage of, the limited sunshine that we get up here in the Great White North, which is a key component of turning on yield, right? So great summary. So that's as I understand it, the offering that's at the base. Of course, they're going to be, and that's what's so great about doing this is in the past, to get this molecule, you had to be a customer that when Matt or Eric or whomever was here was asking you, do you want an inoculant? If you were to say, I don't want an inoculant, but I want the LCO molecule, there was no way to do that. They were paired together in a package, but like I mentioned, we made some changes and that is an offering. So that is the question you will be asked is, do you want an inoculant? Will still remain, and that's going to be the other side, which will be the actual active bacteria. And then there's situations that you may be encouraged to use that technology. The next technology that's available is a phosphorus solubilizing organism called penicillium bulli, named Jumpstart. And like I mentioned before, the offering in the past was Tag Team LCO, which was optimized plus Jumpstart. Well, now we've peeled out the LCO of optimized, so we have the LCO, the inoculant, and now an additional tool, and for some acres is going to be Jumpstart. And where is the fit for those acres? When you think about what limiting factors to soybean production are, if phosphorus is a limiting factor, and that's likely in pHs of 7.2 and above, is where we start to see phosphorus binding with the calcium in the soil, and it might show up on a soil test, but a lot of that phosphorus is not available, especially early in the season, coming off of winter where we have cool soils. A lot more of that phosphorus is bound up, which is why we use starter fertilizer on corn so often, right? To get that phosphorus right there in the seed zone, for early uptick, because phosphorus is a key nutrient for kind of that energy that the crops need. We don't typically use starters on soybeans, more because of the risk involved. Those soybean seed is a lot more sensitive to the salt stresses, and you can kind of mess some things up. But here's an opportunity to put soybeans, or to put phosphorus, more available early on in the growing season, and that's with the addition of Jumpstart in with the inoculant is how they apply it here. They will mix it in the tank and apply it there. 120 days on seed is might be important for some of you. It's certainly a time saver at the seed treater, where we're able to get ahead of the game, and have seed ready to go when you all are ready to pick up and use. The use rate, again, when you think of how seed treatments have evolved in the last 10 years, if we were using all of the old formulations of these technologies, it would be a bad day for the person running the seed treater, and likely you, the grower customer, because it gets to be a high liquid load, and things tend to flow less than in a desirable way. So the higher concentrated product is part of the evolution and fits with the total seed treatment package and allows other solutions to be in the mix. I do want to talk extensively about some of the reasons for NodPro being part of the base seed treatment, and that has a lot to do with some really interesting stress assays that we conduct in our labs. Of course, I'm going to show you some corn, some soybeans, and even other crops too, because I think it really speaks to the science that this is a truly a molecule that is go anywhere and is provides value across crops. So I'll start with soybeans. And what you can see here is an LCO molecule. MOR116 is kind of an internal label that we use here. But in cooler soils and 15 degrees, and by the way, 15 degrees really isn't that cool. It's just a little bit under 60 degrees. You can see where the amount of time it takes for these soybeans to germinate and to grow is hampered by some of the cool temperatures early on. And by having LCO on the seed at time of planting, we can get through some of these stresses. You know, I'm not going to say increase germination. I personally believe there isn't products out there that does that. But I will say there's a difference between germinating seed and emerging seed. And I think we all can agree to that. So the more seed we get out of the ground is really important as well. Plus it's about seedling health too. If you can get that seed out of the ground faster and start to do what a plant's supposed to do, and that's collect the rays of the sun and photosynthesize and create its own food, that's a good day for crops in general. And so you can see kind of some comparative graphs using LCO and without. Like I mentioned, salt stress is another way we can measure these things. And I don't do this because I feel that you all are using starter fertilizers on your soybeans and you're causing ill effects. I'm using this as a depiction to the stresses, the chemical stresses that occur in your soils, and likely those are going to be pH. In some of our higher pH grounds, we do have a buildup of salts in the soil, and it could be other stresses too. Salt is more of a problem when we get into dry spells early on in the growing season. Of course, water is going to negate the ill effects of salt stresses. Here's some of the data that we used in development of the product. And this was, this isn't our data. This is Winfield's data from 2023 so that what we're looking at here is the LCO in NOD Pro applied with a fungicide, insecticide, and inoculant versus a fungicide, insecticide, and inoculant without NOD Pro. So this is yield improvement above just basic soybean inoculant, and the win rate is very impressive at almost a 92% win rate. For those of you that are real geeky on statistics, which I am not, the p-value is significance of a 0.003 is for us as researchers, when we're developing products, that's kind of the holy grail, is to realize this kind of statistical power. So that's some data that we have, and what's really interesting about this is that roughly 2 bushel yield increase is something that we've witnessed within our own trials during development. Here again is another. I think that's sorry, I don't think I can hit these both to play at the same time, but it just shows a time lapse of the speed and the length of growth, which achieves these the measurements that we've seen. So that's kind of a summarization of the stress effect benefits and the ability for having these young crops overcome some of the stresses that they experienced. I do want to show some other crops too, because this is a molecule that we market in a variety of geographies on a variety of crops, and of course corn is one of them. And we do have a starter fertilizer applied product in torque, where we see the same great effects from a stress mitigation standpoint. There's an additional mode of action with LCO that we probably don't talk about enough, and that would be we understand that there's beneficial organisms in the soil like mycorrhizae, And LCO is a is a mycorrhizal spore germinator as well. So we can, for a crop like corn that unfortunately doesn't nodulate, we can have a positive effect on mycorrhization, which allows for better nutrient and water uptake throughout the season. But what you're seeing here again is cold stress and the advantages to, like I mentioned, get out of the ground, emerging uniformly is of course of importance for corn production. And so that was cold stress. And then with salt stress, corn is also sensitive to different levels of salt. And we can see the same thing. I know there's not a lot of peanut growers up here in the upper Midwest, but peanuts is a really unique crop. Very similar to soybeans, how it reacts to things like salt stress, as you can see here. And of course, cold stress as well. Here's the cold stress slide. Wheat is an interesting crop, again, more like corn. Wheat is pretty tough to stress from a cold perspective. There's not ground that's too cold for wheat that LCO can help, but the salt stresses is really where the LCO molecule shines. So that's kind of what I have on a summary for what I'd like to share for slides, Eric. Do you any other things you want me to hit on here, or?
Maybe you could just touch a little bit more on torque and ratchet. I know
Okay,
we've
yeah,
talked a little bit about the LCOs. That would be our Nod Pro product. Bradyrhizobium bacteria, that would be our Celtec or optimized mix of the LCO. And then the Jumpstart, the phosphatase enzyme producing bacteria. Maybe just touch on a little bit more. You said with the starter or in season with corn, we have our torque product. And for beans, correct me if I'm wrong, we can put ratchet on that in season.
yeah, no, thanks for that. Um, Pretty excited about what we've done and expanded the market with the LCO molecule, and of course the brand product is Torque. Of course, Torque has been on the marketplace. The name has been on the marketplace for probably 15 years. We've recently reformulated. It's a higher concentration. It's an EPA registered PGR, and in the past, it was strictly an in-furrow product, and we still have great and wonderful success there, and there's certainly a large market. But when we were developing this product 15 years ago, corn side dress was a thing, but not as big of a thing as it is today. You know, many producers own their own Coulter bars, or they have Y drops on sprayers, because nitrogen management is so critical, and putting nitrogen down when the plant needs it is so important. And that's something that we've expanded our testing and delivery methods, and with great success. And if you think about it, if you think about what we've talked about with the LCO already, the stress mitigation and more importantly, the mycorrhization side of things, think of the physiology of a corn plant in production. When we get to that, you know, kind of that sickly V5 stage where the corn plant is just starting to utilize its nodal roots to acquire nutrition. And here in, you know, maybe a week or two, we're going to enter that rapid growth stage, which is why we need great root system underneath it, and to feed that fast growth that we're going to see here in, you know, 2 weeks after that. Delivering the LCO at that timing in the soil, whether it's Coulter applied or through Y drops, you know, anywhere from V4, you know, through V10, can have that positive PGR response to help that plant understand that the microbiology in the soil is great. It's going to respond with increased root growth, which of course feeds topical growth as well. We can influence, of course, we understand we influence the size of the ear at that point in time in terms of circumference or number of rows around, and of course length as we get later on into that stage. So it's physiologically, it fits very well from a data and performance perspective. That's where some of our biggest gains with using this technology are achieved. whenever anybody's using a starter product that's a PGR and, is supposed to help with these things, we're happy as heck with 5 bushel yield gains. And that's what we see with the torque product. I think we're 60 or 6 bushel, 82% win rate is kind of our long-standing number. But when we get into something like side dressing, there's something about, the things that we can't overcome early season. When we get into that V5 and on, summer's here, right? We don't experience those, those really doggy, crappy days. And it's not uncommon at all to get reports from the field from growers that have adopted this and will leave checks without, to see big gains. Almost embarrassed to talk about here. I don't want to put those numbers in everybody's heads, but they're significantly higher than that 5-6 bushel. Of course, doing everything right is part of it too. We do need great foundational nutrition in our soils, follow your agronomist recommendations on, population and planting date, and all of that is foundational. These aren't miracle products that are going to make up for mistakes we made. So they're a great addition to a great nitrogen split application program. And then you mentioned ratchet as well, would be the foliar applied LCO molecule. So a lot of opportunities to use that, from a price point perspective. The use rate with ratchet, we have a low and a high rate, and what we experience, is, the low rate, every opportunity you have to topically apply anything on the field, whether it's a herbicide application or maybe even early fungicide application. I think all in, it's probably around $5 if you were to do both passes, somewhere in there, 2.5 on the first, 2.5 on the second. ROI extremely strong. Again, the stress mitigation piece and the increased photosynthesis we see with that product is what carries the load. And I can't mention enough what a great ROI and what a low investment to try these technologies. And of course, you mentioned soybeans, labeled for soybeans as well, the same thought process. But one other thing I will bring up, maybe some of your customers have, maybe they have a liquid in-furrow program for their soybeans. I know when you get up into more central Minnesota, where we have a lot higher pHs, like killing soybeans high pHs, they utilize products like Soy Green, which you might have heard of. It's an iron chelate, and that's a starter applied product. And that's a market that a lot of growers utilize torque in with soybeans, in furrow with Soy Green on soybeans. And I'm not saying, that you need to be putting starter on soybeans in our geography, but if you are, for one reason or another, it's worth a look to see if this can help raise the bar of yield there as well.
Great. Yeah, I think that covered most of what we wanted to talk about today. Do you have any closing remarks for us, Adam?
No, love working with you guys. I've wore a lot of hats within this organization, and it's always my go-to place for local information is Storby Seeds. So thanks for the support over the years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's everything we have. Adam, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time to sit down and go through some of these technical details on our products. Like I said, we do have some offerings. We have NodPro, we have the inoculant in the Optimize and the Cell-Tech, and we do have the phosphorus solubilizers in the Jumpstart. So a lot of different packages we can offer. If you have any questions, reach out to us at Storby Seed. We're happy to help pick out a package that fits for your farm. So thanks.